So there's this quote, the worst distance between two people is misunderstanding. And on its face, that sounds like standard, albeit pretty solid relationship
Uh,
advice, right?
right, yeah, it sounds like couples therapy.
Exactly. Like you assume it's about communication, breakdowns with a partner, or I don't know, maybe a boss.
Hmm.
But what if the most tragic, exhausting misunderstanding of your life isn't with someone else at all?
Wow, yeah.
What if that vast, uncrossable distance is entirely internal? Today, we are opening a really fascinating document. It's titled The Self That Flows. And it isn't a single narrative or like a standard self-help manual.
No, not at all. It's incredibly broad.
It's this profound, sprawling synthesis. It pulls from the diaries of Catholic activists, foundational strategies of Hall of Fame basketball coaches, and even the dream journals of 19th century composers. And all of these brilliant minds are orbiting one massive question. How do we stop fighting ourselves and actually find our flow?
And the terrain we're covering to answer that question is just incredibly rich because it forces us to look at a very specific gap in the human experience.
Right.
We're really trying to extract the wisdom from all these diverse fields to help you close the space between the version of yourself that is constantly straining, analyzing and striving,
Yeah.
and the version of yourself that simply effortlessly flows. The document essentially argues that this internal misunderstanding, this perceived distance, is the root of basically all our exhaustion.
Okay, let's unpack this because taking that opening epigraph about distance and flipping it completely inward, it changes the entire paradigm.
Oh, it changes everything because it completely redefines the problem. The mystic Anthony de Mello, he has this parable called Identity that illustrates the psychology of this perfectly.
I love this one.
Yeah, so a seeker comes to a teacher and asks how to find union with God. And the teacher's reply is just devastatingly simple. He says, the harder you seek, the more distance you create. The profound insight here is that the very act of seeking implies an absence.
Right.
If you are reaching for something, your brain registers that you do not currently possess it.
Which, that violates basically everything we're taught in modern culture.
Oh, completely.
We are wired to grind, to chase, to aggressively close the gap between where we are and where we want to be.
Exactly. But when the seeker in the parable asks what to do about this distance, the teacher simply says, understand that it isn't there. De Mello explains this using this concept of not one, not two. So think of the ocean and the wave, or the sun and the light it casts.
Right.
They aren't the exact same thing. Like a wave is a specific manifestation, but you absolutely cannot separate them. They are not one and not two.
That makes a lot of sense.
So when you try to force a connection to your flowing self, you're acting like a wave desperately trying to find the ocean. You're expending massive amounts of energy searching for the very substance you are already made of.
It's like picture looking frantically for the sunglasses that are already sitting on top of your head.
Yes, that is the perfect way to look at
The
it.
stress of the search, like tearing apart the room, it completely blinds you to the fact that you already have exactly what you need. The seeking is actually the barrier to the having.
Because the mechanism of searching occupies so much cognitive space, right? It just
Right.
crowds out the realization of presence. You simply cannot perceive the flow state when your mind is filled with the frantic noise of trying to achieve it.
But wait, I have to push back on this a little.
Sure, go for it.
Because logically, it kind of feels like a trap.
Mm-hmm.
If the ultimate advice is that we're supposed to just understand the distance isn't there, well, how do you do that without trying to understand it?
Right, right.
The act of trying to stop trying is still trying. It's like commanding someone to spontaneously relax. The command itself just creates tension.
And that paradox right there, that is the central tension of this entire philosophy. You literally cannot white-knuckle your way into surrender. If you sit in a chair and aggressively think, I'm going to stop trying and enter my flow state right now, well, your ego is still completely in the driver's seat.
There's still just manufacturing effort.
Exactly. Because you can't force the realization, the text shifts our focus to historical figures who accidentally stumbled into this state of surrender.
Oh, interesting.
They usually found it at the precise moment their conscious effort completely failed them. Or, when they were utterly overwhelmed by a biological or creative force that was just larger than their own ambition.
And the sources give us two incredible anecdotes about this, right?
Oh.
About the nature of creation, showing how greatness arrived through yielding rather than forcing.
Yeah, take the experience of Dorothy Day, the Catholic activist and writer. She documented the precise moment her newborn child was placed in her arms. And she described this exalted flood of love and joy that completely dwarfed anything else she could have ever achieved. She realized that even if she had composed the greatest symphony or written the most brilliant book in human history, it would just pale in comparison to the reality of holding her child.
Wow.
But the deeper philosophical realization was about the mechanism of creation itself. The child wasn't manufactured through her intellectual effort or her striving. The child was received.
Right. She was essentially a vessel for a biological process.
Right.
She didn't have to consciously orchestrate the dividing of cells, She just had to surrender to the reality of what was happening to her.
Exactly.
It's a really profound shift from, fabricating an outcome to midwifing an outcome.
And we see the exact same psychological dynamic in the creative world, too.
Oh, yeah, the Wagner story.
Right. The author Robert Greene shares this amazing account of the composer Richard Wagner. So Wagner was writing the prelude to his opera, Das Rheingold, and he was completely blocked.
Just hit an absolute wall.
An absolute wall. His conscious mind had exhausted every possible musical permutation, and he was just left frustrated and totally drained. He couldn't force the music out, so he gives up.
Yeah.
He walks out into the woods, lies down, and just falls into a hypnagogic state, that liminal space of half-sleep.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
In that half-sleep, he hallucinates that he's sinking into rushing water.
Right.
But the sound of that rushing water suddenly begins to crystallize into distinct musical chords. He wakes up, rushes home, and writes them down. Those unconscious hallucinated chords became the actual prelude.
And Greene's takeaway from this is intensely practical. He just says, walk away when you're blocked.
Yeah.
Wagner's breakthrough wasn't a product of harder focus. It was the result of lateral processing. You see, the unconscious mind is this massive parallel processing supercomputer, but it operates beneath the surface.
Right.
When you are constantly straining and squeezing your conscious mind for an answer, you're basically creating a bottleneck. You occupy all the cognitive space.
Yeah, you're in your own way.
Exactly. It was only when Wagner yielded, when his conscious mind literally powered down into sleep, that the unconscious was able to hand the solution up to the surface. He didn't build the river, he let the river carry him.
It's exactly like the trivia question phenomenon.
Oh, yeah.
The harder you squeeze your brain for an actor's name, the further away it gets. Your striving self is actively blocking the retrieval pathway.
Yep.
But the second you give up, let go of the need to know, and step into the shower, your brain effortlessly hands you the answer. Wagner essentially took a mental shower in the woods.
That's a great way to put it. The need to control the outcome is what creates the friction. Dropping the need for control removes the friction, and that allows the flow to happen.
But I want to flag a potential misunderstanding here for you listening. Because if Wagner just takes a nap in the woods to get a masterpiece, and Dorothy Day just surrenders to biology, well, the logical conclusion might be, great, the secret to the flowing self is passive laziness.
Right.
I'll just sit on the couch and wait for greatness to spontaneously strike. Which, sounds fantastic, but obviously that's missing a massive piece of the puzzle.
Oh, a huge piece. Surrender is completely useless if you haven't already built the vessel to hold it.
Exactly.
Wagner could only translate the sound of rushing water into a complex operatic prelude because he had spent decades relentlessly mastering musical theory, notation, and composition.
Yeah, the unconscious mind can only hand you chords if you have the vocabulary to understand them in the first place.
Right. To really understand flow, we have to shift from the ethereal world of dreams and sudden epiphanies straight into the grueling physical world of extreme discipline.
Which brings us to Gina Auriemma, the legendary women's basketball coach.
Yes.
Document highlights a quote of his that completely rewired how I think about stamina. He says, great players don't get tired. And initially, you assume he just means they run more sprints in practice, that their VO2 max is higher than everyone else's.
But it goes so much deeper than physical conditioning. Auriemma is pointing out the profound absence of internal friction.
Okay.
Think about what exhausts an ordinary player. It isn't just the running, it's the constant calculation. They're thinking about their footwork, second-guessing the pass, worrying about the coach's reaction, managing their own anxiety.
That sounds exhausting just saying it.
It is. The striving self burns a massive amount of mental calories. Great players don't face that exhausting internal resistance because the mechanics of the game have become entirely second nature.
Right.
They aren't consciously playing the game anymore. They have become an expression of the game.
They are the wave. They're no longer fighting the ocean.
Exactly. The cognitive load drops to near zero. And the text pairs this insight with Shunichi Suzuki's famous instruction to his music students. He says, practice on the days that you eat.
Wow.
It's a mandate for relentless daily repetition. Ralph Waldo Emerson frames the exact same mechanism with his aphorism, we gain the thing by doing the thing.
So the daily habit, the grueling, repetitive practice, is not the end goal. It's the bridge.
Yes.
We have to do the heavy lifting so that eventually the doing dissolves into being. The discipline builds the muscle memory so deeply into your nervous system that your conscious, anxious mind can finally clock out.
Precisely.
Which makes me wonder, how do you actually know when you've crossed that line? Like, when does a daily grind transform into the effortless flow Auriemma's talking about?
Well, the crossing of that line is almost always invisible to the person doing the work. You don't wake up on a Tuesday and consciously realize you've achieved mastery.
Right.
You only discover you've crossed from doing into being when reality throws a sudden, unexpected interruption at you and you handle it flawlessly without having to think about it.
Oh, wow.
Flow reveals itself in the unplanned moments. And that brings us to how this internalized flow applies far beyond the boundaries of sports and art, straight into the messy reality of human connection and suffering.
Yeah, the document shares a really powerful story from Tony Dungy about an engineering professor named Hal Ingman Sr.
Such a great story.
This is a man who essentially turned his entire life into an open door. He took in foster kids. He housed college students who had nowhere to go. He spent countless hours every week working with adults with intellectual disabilities.
Yeah.
And he ultimately passed away doing exactly what he always did, trying to help a complete stranger jumpstart her car in a driveway.
And Dungy connects Ingman's life to the verse in Hebrews 13 about entertaining angels without realizing it. The psychological key to that verse is the phrase without realizing it. Ingman wasn't walking around with a moral spreadsheet, calculating his good deeds or assessing whether radical hospitality fit his personal brand. He just saw a need and he met it.
Right.
He had practiced his compassion so deeply on the days that he ate that his hospitality was no longer a task his conscious mind had to perform. It was simply his reflex.
Wow.
He didn't get tired of helping people for the exact same reason Auriemma's great players don't get tired on the court.
He had zero internal friction when a stranger needed help. It was his second nature.
Yes.
And then the text pairs this idea of radical openness with a quote from Zen teacher Henry Schuckman, who says, "There's a blessing in going into our wounds. It's a beautiful thing when the wound becomes the doorway."
That's so powerful.
Which aligns perfectly with Joseph Campbell's mandate to say a heartily yes to your adventure.
Consider the implications of treating a wound as a doorway. Whether it's a blocked creative project, a stranger knocking at your door, or a deep emotional trauma, these aren't obstacles preventing you from living your actual life. They are your life.
Yeah.
The striving self wants to armor up against the unexpected, to fight reality when it doesn't match the plan. The flowing self enters the wound. It accepts the reality of the present moment without resistance.
So what does this all mean? When Schuckman talks about the wound becoming a doorway, it completely reframes how we process disruption.
It really does.
Think of it like encountering a massive detour sign on your drive to an important meeting. Your striving self bangs on the steering wheel, gets furious, and spikes your cortisol levels because you wanted to go straight.
Right, you're just angry at the sign.
Exactly. You are fighting the reality of the roadblock. But your flowing self looks at the sign and immediately accepts that the detour is now the actual route. The road you plan to take no longer exists in this moment. Saying yes to the detour is the adventure Campbell is talking about.
But accepting that detour, or opening your home to a stranger, or leaning into a painful emotional reality without running away, I mean, that requires immense emotional endurance.
Yeah.
You don't just summon that kind of endurance out of thin air in the middle of a crisis.
Exactly. The reflex has to be built. So where does that endurance actually come from?
It comes from the accumulation of the smallest, most mundane choices we make when absolutely no one is watching. The document drives this home by pulling together several quotes that form a complete picture of this process. It warns that a small leak sinks a great ship, and reminds us that a man who masters patience masters everything else.
Right.
And then it brings in Harriet Tubman, who reminds us that we possess the strength, patience, and passion within us to change the world.
Tubman's inclusion here is vital because her life was the ultimate testament to endurance. When she talks about strength and patience, she's talking about the invisible root system.
Yes.
The patience to endure the daily, unglamorous grind, the dangerous, terrifying work in the dark. She represents the absolute peak of building the vessel.
Her patience is the grueling discipline we discussed earlier. It is the capacity to hold the vision. We also see this in Eric Butterworth's advice to grow through life rather than just go through it.
Oh, I like that.
And Elbert Hubbard's reminder to keep the crown of your head high.
Right.
Or even Brian White's funny but true observation, we never really grow up. We only learn how to act in public.
That's so true.
All of this speaks to that deep foundational patience. And then the text brilliantly pairs that with a quote from Wayne Gretzky representing the exact opposite end of the spectrum. You'll always miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
This is where the entire philosophy just clicks together for me. If I am taking Gretzky's shot, my daily discipline, my Tubman-like patience, and my practicing on the days I eat is what built my physical muscles, taught me how to read the ice, and taught me how to aim.
Exactly.
But the surrender, the actual flow state, is the exact millisecond I let the puck leave my stick without clutching it in fear of missing. Discipline builds the capacity. Surrender delivers the performance. You simply cannot have one without the other.
And the profound tension of the self that flows is resolved right there. You have to care deeply enough to build the skill through relentless effort, and then you have to be brave enough to completely let go of the outcome in the moment of action.
Yeah.
The ego does the practicing, but the ego has to step aside for the playing. Which brings us all the way back to the conclusion of the text and that very first quote about distance.
The tragic misunderstanding. The distance between your striving self and your flowing self.
The document leaves us with one final, ultimate question. Can you be still enough to receive what is already here? Look at the cross-section of humanity we've explored today. The exhausted parent flooded with love, the sleeping composer hearing chords in a dream, the generous professor helping a stranger in a driveway, the tireless athlete moving on pure instinct.
Yeah, outwardly, their lives look entirely different.
But internally, they are the exact same person. They have all arrived at that wide-open space of flow by traveling different roads. They all discovered that the distance between themselves and their truest expression wasn't actually there. They just had to stop straining to see it.
They finally stopped searching the house and realized the sunglasses were already on their head. The capacity was always internal.
Exactly. And I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. We've talked so much about surrender arriving when we finally stopped striving. When Wagner stopped fighting the music, he took a nap, and the answer bubbled up from his unconscious.
Right.
But think about how absolutely terrified we are of boredom today. We fill every single silent moment, the line at the grocery store, the elevator ride, the quiet evening with a screen, a to-do list, or constant audio import. We are terrified of empty space.
Oh, absolutely. We never let ourselves just stare at the wall. We view silence as a void that needs to be filled with productivity.
But what if that uncomfortable, twitchy feeling of boredom that you fight off every single afternoon isn't a lack of productivity at all?
Oh, wow.
What if that boredom is actually the exact liminal space, the modern equivalent of Wagner's Half Sleep in the Woods, where your flowing self is desperately trying to hand you the answers your striving self has been sweating over?
That is a wild thought.
We treat boredom like a bug in the human operating system, but what if it's the core feature required for flow? Next time you feel overwhelmed by a problem, what would happen if you dared to do absolutely nothing for 5 minutes?
Doing nothing intentionally might be the most difficult discipline we've discussed today. But that is the challenge to carry forward. Practice on the days you eat. Do the unglamorous work to build the vessel. Take your shots.
Yes.
But when the moment arrives, let the puck go, step into the woods, and allow yourself to just flow. Because the worst distance really is misunderstanding, especially when you misunderstand that everything you are desperately searching for is already right here. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.